Dear YouTube, in case you are investigating this video due to a complaint about hate speech or copyright violation, allow me to give the following assurances. Firstly, a word on copyright. If the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania is unhappy because I've used their propaganda in a way they disapprove of, please know that I am very familiar with copyright law and have ensured that any use of copyrighted material in this video falls within the fair use provisions, particularly as pertain to criticism and parody. Secondly, let me ease any concerns you may have about hate speech. Though I am unapologetically a critic of the leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses, I feel no hatred whatsoever when it comes to individual believers. I have even spoken out on occasion against the harassment and mistreatment of witnesses. Rather than being hateful, this video, and indeed my channel, represents my attempt at respectfully offering a helpful resource for witnesses who are beginning to think of their faith as false or harmful and would like to know the other side of the argument. Hello viewers, and welcome to my rebuttal of the October 2016 JW Broadcasting episode. That's right, October 2016. Now, when it actually was October 2016, I was too busy writing my book or putting the finishing touches to it, so I wasn't able to do a rebuttal that particular month. In fact, for a window of episodes, I wasn't able to do anything, so I'm now catching up on these so-called missing episodes, including October 2016, which was hosted by governing body helper Gary Breaux.
Some outfits are designed to feminize a man's appearance, as homosexuals try to do, especially displaying the buttocks and genitals. Suppose a brother starts rubbing his genitals against a pillow. He gets an erection, but stops before having an orgasm.
Now, it turns out that for reasons I will get into later, it's just as well I wasn't able to do a rebuttal actually in October 2016, because there have been things that have happened since then that make it even more fascinating to revisit this particular episode. And again, I will explain exactly why as we move on with the rebuttal. But without further ado, let's roll the first clip.
We begin with a report from Ukraine. In 2014, political tensions in eastern Ukraine boiled over into a full-blown military conflict. Within months, over 7,600 witnesses needed to flee the area to seek refuge. Others sheltered in their homes. How did our brothers survive physically and spiritually through the fighting? Relief was organized from hundreds of miles away at the branch office in Lviv. In the following interviews, our brothers and sisters describe the love and care they received from the organization and from each other.
True, we ran out of foodstuffs and we had no money, but I knew we would be able to get by. God would not let us die of hunger.
So this is just one of many examples of Watchtower taking a catastrophe that has ruined people's lives and using it to say, well, look at how wonderful we are in providing relief to those who are affected. The only thing is, it turns out time after time after time that when we're talking about those who are affected, what we're really talking about is Jehovah's Witnesses. It's only really Jehovah's Witnesses who get the benefit of aid relief that is sent by Jehovah's Witnesses, and we see the same thing here. What's also interesting is that we've just heard an old lady called Nazedza Gwitze, which I've probably butchered the pronunciation there, I apologise, but she talks about how she knew that Jehovah wouldn't allow her to die through want of food. Now, what's interesting is that as these clips continue, we do learn of a Jehovah's Witness who died during this catastrophe. and you're thinking, well, how come he's protecting you by making sure you have enough food? Why wasn't he protecting this other sister? So it's always dangerous to go down this road of describing God in interventionist terms, and this perfectly highlights that.
Because the shelling was happening so often, it was impossible to conduct our usual meetings. We also couldn't organize the ministry in the normal way. It was just too dangerous.
When we received the first reports about the unrest in the East, our branch committee gathered and we prayerfully analyzed the situation. We asked Jehovah for wisdom, how to act, how to help our brothers to be spiritually and physically safe. We are also sending regular update reports to the governing body.
More than 156 tons of food and 21 tons of clothing donated by local brothers have been distributed to fellow believers and also to some non-witnesses.
We had been told that we would be receiving about 5 tons of relief supplies. So we were astounded when instead of 5 tons, we received 15 tons.
It was lovely to find little notes that our brothers and sisters had written and included in the packages.
Brothers from neighboring cities responded and offered their homes, provided foodstuffs, and more importantly, their brotherly hospitality.
So we are ready to make sacrifices, to adjust our schedules, and even take time out from our families to render practical help to our brothers.
The local elders from Slavyansk organized small congregations and regularly conducted meetings to support them spiritually.
Major repairs have been carried out on 20 houses of brothers and sisters, and minor repair work was done on 72 houses and apartments.
We prepared 2 more programs, this time not only for the congregations in the war zone, but for the whole country of Ukraine, even for Russia and Belarus. We even had 325,000 in attendance.
Now, I know that many of you watching this will be religious and you will derive comfort in times of crisis from spiritual help, from people giving sermons or reading the Bible or what have you. I just feel that if you're going to make videos effectively bragging about how you have responded to a crisis of this kind, what really matters is practical assistance. And although we do hear about practical aid being given, it's almost as though the onus is on the spiritual side, as though the spiritual side is more important. Oh, we held all these meetings, we had different countries tied in, this was our attendance. I don't really see that that's relevant. And when it comes to the practical aid, you did hear the branch committee member from the Ukraine branch say, well, we also helped a few non-witnesses. But when you watch the whole segment, it's very, very clear that the focus of help, the focus of the aid supplies, the focus of the rebuilding work is for the brothers, is for fellow believers. And I don't see how there is anything extraordinary about that. I don't see how this is something that you can brag about. Oh, well, we're an organisation who looks after our own when disaster strikes. If you're going to model yourself on Christianity, on, for example, the parable of the Good Samaritan, which I think is, and I'm not a believer, I think that's one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful part of the Bible, because it's showing how someone's religion or someone's nationality should be irrelevant when disaster strikes. You help someone who is in need. But with these propaganda videos, what you routinely see is Jehovah's Witnesses only helping Jehovah's Witnesses.
An interesting experience was the response of the people who were not Jehovah's Witnesses. They belonged to another religion. Yet they said, "You are the only ones that really care. Your genuine love is shown by your deeds. This is what makes us different from all other religions."
I would honestly dispute that Jehovah's Witnesses have genuine love that sets them apart from all other religions. I think the love that Jehovah's Witnesses show to each other is conditional, as we've seen clear evidence of in this very segment, where the aid is being distributed primarily among fellow believers. So in other words, you're going to be on the receiving end of love and support if you share our beliefs. And furthermore, if you end up becoming a witness and you do something that we disapprove of, or heaven forbid, you stop believing what we believe, well, you'll just see how we react. And spoiler alert, it won't be loving.
Unfortunately, one of our sisters was killed.
I realized that a person can lose everything, but that is really nothing compared to losing your children. The brothers and sisters listened to us. We cried together. I just can't put it into words. It is as if Jehovah is holding you in his arms. He doesn't let you fall, as if he is saying to you, "Don't let go, my dear one. I'm helping you. I'm supporting you."
With Jehovah, there are no borders between nations. I could see that this is the true religion.
We continue to pray for our brothers in Ukraine. We're confident of Jehovah's love for them, and we know he'll sustain them through any tribulation. Our worldwide brotherhood is truly special. When our brothers are in need, we want to help in whatever way possible.
When our brothers are in need, we want to help in any way possible. Well, again, I don't see how there is anything special in just helping your brothers, in just helping people who share your religion. And then you have this heartbreaking story of the girl who died, and you even have her mother being interviewed. How on earth do you reconcile the fact that you've literally begun the segment interviewing an older lady who's saying that, oh, well, God would never allow us to die through want of food? Well, where was God for this sister dying? Because right at the beginning, you have said that God's going to intervene on your behalf. God's going to make sure that your belly is full throughout the conflict. Well, it doesn't matter if your belly is full, if, you know, that's not going to help you dodge a bullet. I don't know the exact circumstances under which this girl died. But again, if you are going to invoke an interventionist God, you can't just take credit for those who make it, those who survive, those who have full bellies. You also have to reconcile the instances where God doesn't intervene.
Well, because of our sinful nature, we are all in debt to Jehovah, deserving of death. We are unable to cover our expenses. But when we go to Jehovah in prayer and beg for his help, in his great mercy and kindness, he tells us not to worry. He has given the life of his Son to pay our debt. And on the basis of that sacrifice, he is willing to cover our expenses, the sins we commit daily, and to extend forgiveness to us until we are able to get back on our feet when we reach perfection in the new world.
So I just want you to remember what Gary Breaux has said here. He said that we are all deserving of death. We are all indebted to Jehovah, and we are dependent on Jehovah's loving mercy in order to survive Armageddon, essentially. If you're not one of the 144,000, if you're not going to heaven, you're hoping to be a survivor of Armageddon, well, you're only going to survive Armageddon if you're in God's good books. And as we're going to learn, being in God's good books and surviving Armageddon involves our willingness to forgive others. And this has a very interesting and disturbing connection with the whole issue with child abuse mishandling, as I will come to later.
What can help us to settle differences quickly? The first thing we should do is to try and let love cover over the wrong. Can I just forgive and forget? If we're able to do so, this is a beautiful way to maintain the congregation's peace and unity. But if we're struggling to forget the wrong, there are two scriptures that are especially helpful in this matter of settling differences. They are Matthew 5:23 and 24, and Matthew 18:15 through 17.
So now it's getting interesting, and you may remember at the beginning of this rebuttal, I said that in a way I was grateful that I wasn't able to do this video actually in October 2016 or shortly thereafter because of things that have happened since then. And the reason I'm saying that is that this particular video has not aged well. And I was watching this thinking, how did I miss this? Because I honestly didn't have time to watch the episode even. Gary Breaux does this video where he is saying, well, if you're having a problem with your brother, really the best thing to do is to forgive and forget. So we have this whole thing of forgiveness. And then he says, but if you're having a problem forgiving and forgetting, there are these two scriptures, one of which is Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17. Where have we heard Gary Breaux talking before about Matthew 18, 15 through 17?
Now, there's something that the apostates are talking about and trying to put forward. The media has picked it up. Others have also picked it up. And that is our scriptural position of having two witnesses a requirement for judicial action if there's no confession. Now, if you open your Bibles to Deuteronomy 19:15, our good reasoning is pretty solid on this. In Deuteronomy 19:15, the scripture is very, very clear. It says, no single witness may convict another for any error or any sin that he may commit. On the testimony of two witnesses or on the testimony of three witnesses, the matter should be established. It's very clear, isn't it? You cannot establish a judicial committee based on one witness. But now listen, here's what they say. Well, now look, the Old Testament also says that adulteresses should be stoned. Now, since you're not doing that, why do you stick to this two-witness rule? And see, if you're not careful, that can do some tricks on your mind because you have to think it through. Well, how might we do that? Well, we'll go to Matthew chapter 18 and verse 16 because obviously Christ Jesus established the Christian arrangement. And notice what he said, Matthew 18 and verse 16. He says, but if he does not listen, take along with you one or two more, so that on the testimony of two or three witnesses, every matter may be established. So Christ Jesus establishes the fact that there has to be two witnesses. Now, it doesn't mean that if there's only one witness, that there's no consequences. There might be, depending upon the situation. But the scriptures are very clear. Before a judicial committee can be convened, there has to be a confession or two witnesses. So we will never change our scriptural position on that subject.
Isn't that interesting? So in two videos, you have Gary Breaux talking about Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17. But in both videos, as we are going to see, he gives two very different applications. So in the November 2017 JW Broadcasting episode, which we've just seen a clip from, and it's worth noting that we don't know the exact timescale here. So Gary Breaux wasn't giving these comments that we've just seen in November 2017. We know he was giving them at least a few months in advance. We don't know exactly when this particular morning worship was filmed. Nonetheless, he gives a morning worship aimed at apostates, and particularly the issue, the very justifiable issue with the two-witness rule, and the way that Watchtower clings to this rule, effectively using it to cover up child abuse by saying, well, if there aren't two witnesses to a child being raped, then as far as we're concerned, it's dubious that it happened, which is essentially the position that Watchtower takes. And Gary Breaux here, in the clip that we've just seen, argues in favour of Watchtower's position by saying, well, look, we know that this was a requirement in Deuteronomy, in the Old Testament. Apostates and critics could argue that it was also a requirement to stone adulterers. But guess what? We get to apply the two-witness rule according to the New Testament because of Matthew 18. And he goes on to read from Matthew 18 as though Jesus is endorsing the two-witness rule in Matthew 18. But as we are going to see in his further comments in the October 2016 JW Broadcasting episode, in this JW Broadcasting episode, he gives a completely different application. And the more you listen to his application, the more you realise that there is no way in the world that Watchtower can justify extending or applying Matthew 18 to child abuse.
Now open your Bible to Matthew chapter 18. We mentioned earlier that it has a more limited application. How so? Notice verse 15. Moreover, if your brother commits a sin, go and reveal his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Here Jesus says, if your brother commits a sin. That is much different than just having something against us. We are talking about a situation that is much more serious. What situation? The Revised Organized to Do Jehovah's Will book, page 136, explains that it involves financial or property matters, such as failing to repay a loan or committing fraud, or the offense might be slander, which seriously affects someone's reputation. Of course, there are sins that can be resolved between the individuals concerned, but are also serious enough to merit expulsion from the congregation if not settled. Before we start applying Matthew 18:15, we should first consider whether it is really necessary to pursue the matter. Could we simply forgive the individual for what was done or even take the loss if it were a financial matter? That is a personal decision.
So I want you to take note of this repeated onus on forgiving and forgetting, because this is a theme that runs throughout Gary Breaux's talk and indeed the broadcast, because the music video is going to be about forgiveness as well. And I'm going to argue later as to why this whole forgive and forget culture poses some serious problems when it comes to child sex abuse. But going back to what he's just said about Matthew 18, he quotes from the Organized to Do Jehovah's Will book, which indeed on page 136 applies Matthew 18 verses 15 to 17 to financial or property matters such as failing to repay a loan or committing fraud, or the offence might be slander, which seriously affects someone's reputation. So those offences, what we're talking about basically are personal disputes, are grievances that border on something that the congregation can take action regarding. In no way is Matthew 18 applicable to child sex abuse, which is a crime. We're talking here about something that could potentially be resolved and only starts to become a problem for the elders if it can't be resolved. That does not describe in any way, shape or form child sex abuse. But rather than take my word for it, listen to more of what Gary Breaux has to say on this, and it becomes more and more obvious that you simply cannot use Matthew 18 in propping up the two-witness rule.
If we decide to pursue the matter, what do? Jesus helps us in verse 15 when he says that we reveal his fault between the two of us alone. We do not discuss the matter with others, attempting to get them to side with us. We did not go straight to the elders and try to get them to solve the problem for us. No, we try to resolve the matter between us. And since our goal is to settle the difference, maintain our relationship with Jehovah, and help our brother do the same, we make repeated efforts to speak with him when our initial efforts are unsuccessful. Keep in mind that Jesus did not say, "Go only once and reveal his fault." When applying this first step, make it clear that your motive is to gain your brother. Also, it would be helpful to clearly state that you are applying the first step in settling differences as outlined by Jesus at Matthew 18:15. Of course, this would be stated in a kindly, non-threatening manner, but still in a way to show the seriousness of getting the matter settled. What if the first step in gaining your brother is unsuccessful? Notice verse 16 explains step 2. But if he does not listen, take along with you one or two more, so that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter may be established. Yes, we talk with him in the company of 1 or 2 more. Would that be our best friends? No. The whole purpose is to gain our brother. Teaming up with 2 of our best friends could alienate our brother. Instead, it makes sense that we would choose other mature Christians. How would mature Christians be helpful? Well, are we misunderstanding things? Could they help him to reason about the matter? Could a solution be found? Having spiritually mature witnesses there may help to resolve the matter. Generally, applying steps 1 and 2 will result in gaining your brother and preserving the peace of the congregation.
We've just heard Gary Breaux talking about Matthew 18 in terms that make it irreconcilable with the issue of child sex abuse, because it has these steps that are required in resolving disputes that bear no relation to an accusation of child rape, to an accusation of child molestation. For example, Matthew 18 says, well, if this awful thing happens, what you need to do is go and try and resolve the issue between you and him alone, meaning, in this case, the abuser. So it's asking a victim of abuse to go to the abuser to resolve the issue between them alone. And even by Watchtower's current standards, that would be out of the question. So recently, Watchtower released a document called Jehovah's Witnesses' Scripturally-Based Position on Child Protection. And under point 9, it says, elders never require victims of child abuse to present their accusation in the presence of the alleged abuser. Matthew 18 can't apply then, can it? If elders don't require victims of child abuse to present their accusations to the abuser, to the alleged abuser, how can Matthew 18 apply? And it then goes on to say, or Gary Breaux then goes on to give the next step, which is to take along 2 more. If he's not listening to just you on your own, then take along a couple more who can act as witnesses. And he says these can be mature witnesses, but whatever you do, make sure they're not close friends, or make sure you're not ganging up on this person. But take along some mature witnesses. Is he seriously suggesting, again, if we apply this to child abuse, that a child abuse victim should pick non-elders from the congregation to talk about what's happened to them? I don't think Watchtower would want that somehow. I suspect, based on what I know about their obsession with confidentiality and on keeping everything hush-hush and on a need-to-know basis, I suspect that they wouldn't want child abuse victims to select for themselves members of the congregation to say, you know what, this brother abused me, do you mind acting as my witness while I go and confront him? And let me give you the details on what's happened. Something tells me that Watchtower wouldn't want that to happen.
If he does not respond to these repeated efforts to help him, Then what? You have a decision to make. Are you willing to forgive your brother, even take a loss if a financial matter is involved? If you choose to pursue the matter further, listen to Jesus' words recorded at verse 17. If he does not listen to them, speak to the congregation. If he does not listen even to the congregation, let him be to you just as a man of the nations and as a tax collector. At this point, the body of elders representing the congregation will get involved. They will review the facts of the case and determine if a judicial committee should be appointed. Happily, though, these situations are rare and matters are often resolved peacefully before reaching such a serious point.
So just to make it absolutely clear, Gary Breaux is not talking about child abuse in this particular episode, but he is explaining a verse that elsewhere he uses to defend the two-witness rule. And again, we get further reminders of how this absolutely cannot be applied to child sex abuse, because he's saying, well, if after privately confronting the person against whom you have this grievance, and if after then going to them with mature Christians, the issue still isn't settled, can you forgive and forget? Can you just drop the matter? Or do you really have to then go to the elders? Well, if elders are really shepherds of the flock, if elders take seriously their duty to protect the congregation, they shouldn't want an abuse victim to forgive and forget and to not come to them with what's happened. They would be wanting them to come to them and so that they could deal with it. So again, Matthew 18 doesn't apply to child sex abuse, because how on earth can you tell a child sex abuse victim, well, have you considered forgiving and forgetting? Let's just let this drop, you know. It's amazing to me, and I'm again kicking myself that I didn't know that he'd said this, and only now am I aware of it. But again, this all comes back to the issue of forgiveness, and you'll remember that earlier in this rebuttal, I drew your attention to the fact that the rebuttal is essentially about forgiveness, and how Gary Breaux had said that we are all worthy of death.
We are all in debt to Jehovah, deserving of death.
Now, in the context of those statements that he made earlier, or that you saw him make earlier, I just want to take you back in the broadcast to something that Gary Breaux said about forgiveness.
Consider this. You're concluding your day in prayer. You pray for Jehovah's name to be sanctified. You pray for his kingdom to come. You ask that he bless the governing body and the brothers taking the lead. You share with him a few matters of personal concern. And then you say, Jehovah, I know I'm imperfect, and I sin against you often. Please forgive me for my sins. Let me stand before you in a clean and approved state. Now the question is, has Jehovah heard your heartfelt request? Will he forgive you? Well, what did Jesus say? Look again at verse 14. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Did you notice Jesus' use of the word if? That tells us that forgiveness is not automatic. It comes with a condition or price. What price? According to Jesus, if we forgive others, the condition has been met. The price has been paid. What will Jehovah do for us? Jesus said, he will also forgive you.
Now, it's important to stress again at this point that Gary Breaux is not talking about child abuse in these comments. We have to afford him the benefit of the doubt and say that when he's making these comments or he's preparing his comments, he doesn't have child abuse in mind. Nevertheless, this whole thing of forgiving and forgetting has huge potential consequences when it comes to the way child abuse allegations are dealt with and the attitude that victims and their parents are expected to have toward perpetrators. We recently did a Watchtower in Focus episode where we had a victim's father on our show talking about how he had discovered, to his horror, in a Kingdom Hall, his daughter being sexually molested. And some of the comments that we got after that episode were people saying, well, if I'd have been in that situation, that guy would have left the building in an ambulance. People don't apparently understand how it could be that as a Jehovah's Witness, you would make yourself complicit in delaying the course of justice, in covering up abuse, in just going along with what the elders tell you to do. But I feel that by dwelling on what's said in this JW Broadcasting episode, we can just get a glimpse into the mentality of a believing Jehovah's Witness. And the fact that when a child abuser happens to share your beliefs, happens to be a fellow believer, the dynamic shifts so that if they are repentant, if they are deemed to be truly sorry for what's happened, then you as a Jehovah's Witness have to forgive and forget. You have to forgive them. And it's this attitude toward pedophiles, toward child abusers, that contributes to this perfect storm within the Jehovah's Witness religion, so that you can have pedophiles who exploit this culture of forgiveness to go on and accrue victim after victim after victim, and all they have to do on each occasion is put on a show. Oh, this was a moment of weakness, I don't know what I was doing, I'm really sorry, win over the elders, and then they get a carte blanche to go and do the whole thing again. Gary Breaux may not have been thinking of child abuse when he was preparing these notes, but this whole attitude of forgive and forget is extremely dangerous and harmful when applied to instances of child sex abuse.
Once we have followed the simple steps outlined by Jesus and have forgiven others, the condition has been met. The price has been paid. Then what will Jehovah do for us? Jesus said, He will also forgive us. As a result, we will gain the peace of mind that comes with a clean conscience, knowing that we have Jehovah's favor and blessing. We can then make a valuable contribution to the beautiful, united brotherhood that we are privileged to be a part of.
So remember again what was said earlier by Gary Breaux about us all being worthy of death. We only get a stab at salvation due to God's mercy. Part of the process of getting access to salvation is applying Matthew 6:14 and forgiving others freely if we ourselves want to be forgiven. If you factor in all of that and then go over what Gary Breaux has just said, again, it paints a very disturbing picture of, or it gives us a very disturbing insight into Jehovah's Witness culture when it comes to child abuse. And it's a very, very dangerous form of thinking to say, well, if you don't forgive people, you're going to die. You're going to die at Armageddon if you are not sufficiently forgiving. Because that then allows predators, pedophiles to come along and say, well, you need to forgive me. I'm really sorry, brother, but you need to forgive me if you're going to get through Armageddon. That is the culture, the Jehovah's Witness culture, when it comes to dealing with these matters, and it's extremely dangerous.
But think about Jehovah for a moment. He could push any of us, couldn't he? He could force us to serve him. He certainly has the power, but he never uses it that way. Instead, he invites, he encourages, and he explains the blessings, the curses, depending upon how we decide. But it's up to us, isn't it? For example, Isaiah 48:18. Jehovah says, if only you would pay attention to my commandments, then your peace would become like a river, and your righteousness like the waves of the sea. Beseeching, but not forcing.
Stephen Lett is here telling us that Jehovah doesn't force people to worship him. Apart from that thing where he threatens to destroy us if we don't follow the governing body, apart from that, he's totally not forcing anyone. It's an entirely optional thing.
Now think about it. If Jehovah doesn't force, he doesn't want us to force either, does he? For example, parents need to be very careful they don't just simply push their children to serve Jehovah, but rather lovingly, beseechingly, like Jehovah, try to reach the heart and, of course, clearly show them the blessings that will come their way if they do.
Stephen Lett here tells Jehovah's Witness parents that under no circumstances are they to force their children to serve Jehovah. Compare that with the following comments that were made at the 2015 Regional Convention by another governing body member, Anthony Morris.
And your young ones, we've been entreating you, you've got to get that clear. Especially as you get older, the only way you're getting through this storm, the great one, is your relationship with God. Your personal relationship, just like everybody else. Unless you're a toddler, we know how Jehovah will sanctify them. But as you get older, you are responsible. Remember the nice demo? We've mentioned that before. Well, I'm not ready to get baptized. Okay, let's hold off on your driver's license. What? I'm 16. What are you talking about? I'm ready. I know I'm ready. Yeah, you're ready for a driver's license, but you're not ready to dedicate your life. Explain that one to heaven. That's why we repeated it on the program.
So who are Jehovah's Witnesses supposed to listen to here? Because you have literally just seen two different governing body members giving entirely different messages. You've got Stephen Lett saying, well, we would never force children to serve Jehovah. And then you've got Anthony Morris saying, well, actually, once children get to a certain age, you're probably within your rights to withhold a driver's license. And if you think that's not what he's saying, I would urge you to type in Anthony Morris child baptism in the YouTube search bar, and that will take you to one of my older videos where I show a clip of Anthony Morris being far more explicit in suggesting that parents would be within their rights to bribe their children by telling their kids that until they get baptized, they're not allowed to get their driver's license. And yet we've just had a clip from Stephen Lett saying, oh, well, we would never force children to serve Jehovah. Honestly, Watchtower, get your message straight. Who are we to listen to at this point?
Another example, elders should never try to push Jehovah's sheep. I heard an experience about an elder during his part asked the brothers for a show of hands how many were going out in service the next morning. Well, only a few raised their hand. He proceeded to scold the congregation that more should be going out. Well, he then unwisely asked for another show of hands. You guessed it, fewer raised their hand the second time. Take another example. Those who conduct Bible studies should not just try to push their students to do the right thing. You've got to quit smoking. You've got to get rid of those idols. No, not with external pressure, but by motivating their hearts. You motivate your students.
I actually appreciate the comments about elders not being too pushy, because if you're watching this as a Jehovah's Witness or a former Jehovah's Witness, I'm sure you'll be able to think of examples of pushy elders and elders who seem to delight in using their power and authority to guilt trip people. But what I actually found really interesting about that brief clip was where he's talking about Bible studies and the way witnesses are to mold them into Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to things like smoking and that kind of thing. And he says, don't do it by external pressure. Do it by motivating their heart. In other words, do it by coercing them. I just find the use of language so interesting in these JW Broadcasting episodes. They can't bring themselves to, say, coerce them, manipulate them, guilt trip them. They use more appealing words like, oh, motivate their hearts to do what you want them to do.
Or take another example. None of us should try to push schoolmates, workmates, relatives to accept the truth. A pushing approach, shoving approach, even though motivated with sincerity, has actually resulted in people being stumbled away from the truth for many years. Makes me think of the story or the saying that when a person first learns the truth, you should lock them up for about 6 months to contain or minimize the damage they do. Well, that saying is totally erroneous. You shouldn't lock that brother up. You should follow that brother. See, that brother has zeal, doesn't he? But it's true, we probably do need to help him to properly channel that zeal so that he doesn't try to force his relatives or others to accept the truth that he is so excited about.
Jehovah's Witnesses don't force people to accept the truth. They just think that everyone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness will be worthy of death when Armageddon comes, and they crave for Armageddon to come. And if you think about it, if you honestly believed that your family who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses would be destroyed imminently if they didn't join you in becoming a Jehovah's Witness, why wouldn't you push it on them? Why would you hold back? If you held back, and if you weren't that enthusiastic in trying to warn them, well, then you wouldn't really love them, would you? You wouldn't really be bothered about whether they get destroyed or not.
Unclean conduct can easily stumble one's inside or outside the congregation. But now, what about in an area where we have a scriptural right to do something? Now, surely exercising that right, if it stumbles someone, we can't be held accountable for that, can we? Well, open up to 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And here, very interestingly, this scripture answers that question. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. It says, but keep watching that your right to choose does not somehow become a stumbling block to those who are weak. Isn't that interesting? Even our right to choose, if it would stumble someone, we wouldn't exercise that right according to this scripture. The Apostle Paul, in verse 13 of that same chapter, he said he wouldn't even eat meat ever again if it stumbled his brother. Well, like Paul, are we willing to forego our rights regarding, for example, wearing a beard, wearing heavy makeup, using alcohol as just a few examples, if exercising that right might even possibly stumble someone?
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how Watchtower gets to control Jehovah's Witnesses to the point where men are not allowed to have beards, even though it's written nowhere in the Bible that you're not allowed to have a beard. If anything, you can find verses that say that you should have a beard. But it all boils down to stumbling, apparently. You shouldn't be insisting on your rights if you're a Jehovah's Witness. What an awful thing that would be. If you were to say, well, it's my right to do this, and nowhere in the Bible does it say that I can't do this. No, brother. You need to think about stumbling all of these people who, down through the decades, have been conditioned into thinking that facial hair can be a bad thing if it's below the lip. Watchtower basically says to Jehovah's Witnesses, we've decided that beards stumble people, therefore you're not allowed to have them.
The progress in Mexico really is because of the families being united, and when you get the husband and wife together, then the whole family comes in the truth.
In 1961, Sister Esther Lozano preached to our grandparents. My grandfather first got interested through the book From Paradise Lost to Paradise Regained.
When I placed the book with his wife and she gave it to him, he decided that That's what he was looking for. He says, well, when can I be baptized?
3 visits later, a study was started with the entire family.
And the oldest son was only 13. He says, I'm getting baptized too. About a year ago, he came and brought me a letter and told me how happy he was that I had gone to their home and preached to them. And that was a happy experience of my life.
Today in our family, we are 23 witnesses spread over 4 generations, and now my brother and I are serving here at the Central America branch.
Again, we have the appeals to emotion in this testimony, which is by Esther Lozano, and I'm sure Esther is sincere in being tearful and choked up when she thinks of all these people that she has influenced to become Jehovah's Witnesses, either directly or by preaching to their parents. But that doesn't make it a good thing that she's had that impact. Her legacy in life is to get people embroiled in a cult that looks out for its own interests first, that is abusive, that fails to protect children, that will quite happily persuade someone to die rather than accept a blood transfusion, that will break up families through shunning. Introducing someone to that kind of organisation, I'm sorry Esther, is not something you get to be proud of. And I found it interesting where Esther said, when you get the husband and wife together, then the whole family comes in the truth. Which basically means, well, if you can persuade the parents, you can persuade the children. Because that's how child indoctrination works. If the parents believe something, inevitably the children will believe it too. And I couldn't help but cringe when they started talking about the Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained book, a copy of which I have, and I have shown it on this channel before. By the way, sorry about these streaks of sun in the shot. I set up the camera, however, whatever the lighting's doing, I should pay more attention to that, but hopefully it's not too distracting. Anyway, the Paradise Lost book, with its charming artwork depicting people falling to their deaths at Armageddon, as you can see there. Absolutely charming for children to be subjected to that from a young age. And while we're on the subject of beards, which I was just talking about, feast your eyes on this wonderful depiction of a beardless Jesus on the stake being crucified. Can you say crucified when it's not a cross? I have to research that. Anyway, rather than feeling admiration for Esther Lozano, I actually feel pity for her. Because like so many of these testimonies by older witnesses, you just feel sadness that this person has wasted their entire life, and they're now in the twilight years looking back. Their entire life has just been chewed up by Watchtower in its pursuit of its own interests.
Oh, I forgot to talk about my husband. He was the branch overseer at that time. We were there in the same branch for 5 years. We got to know each other, but I didn't pay attention to him because I was always in the service. And so, but I don't know when he decided he wanted to get married, because I know that wasn't his goal in life. And so I wrote Brother Nor and told him if he was surprised to hear that we were going to be married. And he did write me back and also said, well, this is what he said in the letter. You're always jolly and talkative when I'm around. On the other hand, Brother Lozano is so quiet. I must say, it is an interesting combination. Both of you together can serve him and aid one another in your true worship. This is one of my greatest treasures, is having that letter from Brother Nor. And when Rudy died, I didn't dwell on that. I remembered I made my dedication to Jehovah, and I know that he would want me to put that first in my life. So I did not really suffer that much about his death, because I became even more involved in theocratic activities.
I found this part very interesting because Esther Lozano is talking about writing to Brother Noor to see if he would be surprised that she's getting married. I think what she means is she was asking for his permission, or she was getting his approval, because she didn't do this after they'd got married. Oh, are you surprised to hear that we've been married? It was before the marriage, which indicates, at least to me, you're basically asking for Brother Noor's approval, which I think says a lot about the way the organisation was structured back then. Because if you read modern Watchtower literature, it gives this impression that everything's always been decided on by the governing body. The governing body directed for this to be done. The governing body directed for that to be done. And when you actually research Watchtower history, from Russell through Rutherford through to the early Noor presidency, you realise that there was no governing body. There just wasn't. It was the president. The president ran everything, which is why it makes perfect sense to me that Esther Lozano is not only writing to Brother Noor to ask his blessing on the marriage, but she's also clutching onto that letter and treating it like a treasured item, I forget the exact wording, right through to her old age, because that's how highly she esteemed Brother Noor, even though he is just supposed to have been another Christian. But as you know, when you research these things, you realise, well, he wasn't quite just another Christian. He was the president of the organisation, and it was the president who ran things, not a governing body.
It's such a pleasure to be with people that have dedicated their lives to Jehovah. And that's what makes me happy, because I know Jehovah counts them as his precious sons and daughters.
You just cannot have a JW Broadcasting episode without someone tearing up on camera. And again, I am sure Esther Lozano is sincere. I'm sure these aren't crocodile tears. I'm sure she's genuinely moved due to her delusion at her legacy of bringing all these people into the organisation. But what we're seeing here is manipulation, and Watchtower showing this on camera because it knows full well that by appealing directly to the emotions and just leaving logic and reason to one side, they can be far more manipulative, or as Stephen Lett put it, motivating the heart.
Of course, not every courtship leads to marriage. If you're dating, can you look past your emotions to honestly see the differences and flaws in your potential mate? Can you accept these? Or are they serious enough for you to end your courtship? That's a situation depicted in the third and final part of the series, Preparing for Marriage.
We spent a lot of time talking on the phone. Everything just naturally seemed to click. I was convinced he was the one. But over time, I started to notice some things. I was starting to see patterns. And they didn't seem to be getting better. I wasn't even sure our goals were the same anymore. I felt alone.
I felt alone. So as you heard, we are in what is mercifully the third and final instalment of preparing for marriage, which is basically giving young single Jehovah's Witnesses even more hang-ups and even more fears when it comes to dealing with the opposite sex. And in this particular dramatization, we are introduced to a young couple who initially are very much in love and very much enjoying getting to know one another, but things turn sour when it turns out that the guy doesn't sufficiently have his life oriented towards being a Jehovah's Witness.
They reminded me about what Jesus said when building a tower. For example, who of you wanting to build a tower does not first sit down and calculate the expense to see if he has enough to complete it? I realised that I was about to enter into a building project of my own, my relationship with Shane, and I too needed to calculate the expense before I commit to it. They encouraged me to talk to Shane and tell him about the things that were concerning me. So, I did. And my mum was right. I was okay. More than okay, really. Shane and I decided it was best to break off the relationship. And some years later, I found someone that loves Jehovah as much as I do. And I love him with my whole heart.
Our sister wisely compared her relationship to a building project. She calculated the expense of any traits she saw during their courtship well before they could become problems in a marriage.
I find it fascinating when Watchtower does a piece of video propaganda that's so transparent in revealing what its agenda is. And in this case, you have a video that's supposed to be about helping young people navigate their way through relationships. And instead what it does is it presents people who aren't sufficiently enthralled by Watchtower and who aren't exerting themselves to fulfill Watchtower's requirements. It's painting them as being unsuitable as marriage partners. And it's saying that if you are in a relationship with someone who doesn't have their goals suitably aligned and who isn't orienting their lives around serving Watchtower, then the likelihood is that they will also be greedy and selfish. They won't help out with the dishes. They'll be on their phone constantly and they won't be interested in talking to you. They'll be watching football all the time. You don't want to bother with them. That's classic manipulation, and it's aimed at people who are simply trying to navigate their way through relationships or the potential of being in a relationship while they are in an organisation that is already fiercely repressive when it comes to sexuality.
When we moved into Finland, the brothers in Russia and those countries were under ban. They needed spiritual food, and so it had to be supplied to them. So we used to send people in as tourists, and they would meet the brothers there and deliver the food to them. Without Jehovah's blessing and his spirit, we couldn't have done it at all. It's amazing to think that the amount of spiritual food that got in there, they translated it and they made it available. And we did that for over 20 years without any mishaps. It couldn't happen without Jehovah's blessing.
So we're now hearing the testimony of long-time Bethelites Viv and Anne Moritz, and you just heard Viv telling the audience that it couldn't have happened without Jehovah's blessing. The work that he did over the decades, he doesn't believe that he could have done that work or achieved what he achieved without Jehovah's blessing. And unfortunately, this is what we get time and time again in these JW Broadcasting episodes. Fairly modest achievements being talked up and pointed to as evidence of Jehovah's hand, when in actuality, outside of Jehovah's Witnesses, people are achieving extraordinary things all the time. Things far more extraordinary than Jehovah's Witnesses have ever accomplished, if you think about it. And yet they're not appealing to God as the be-all and end-all, as the only way they could have achieved it.
The best decision I ever made was to put my life in Jehovah's hands and to say, you decide where I go and what I do. I've had the feeling all along, and it's proven true so far, that everything I have done has been training for something else. So what I'm doing now is still training. It must be for the new world because I haven't got much time left in this one. What will it be? Well, who knows? So my recommendation to everyone is, don't decide for yourself. Let Jehovah do it.
Don't decide for yourself, let Jehovah do it. Put your life in Jehovah's hands. And where has it got him? Again, he has expended his entire limited time on this planet in service of Watchtower, in service of an organisation that throughout those decades of his service was saying, the end's coming imminently, the end's just around the corner. The end's coming in 1975. Oh, well, actually, forget we said that. The end's coming before the generation that witnessed the events of 1914 dies off. Actually, forget we said that. Just the end's coming before the overlapping generation passes away. And this guy has served Watchtower throughout all of that. And having expended himself and given everything for the organisation, he's too emotionally invested at this point, and he can only urge fresh generations of Jehovah's Witnesses to make the same mistakes that he made.
The willing spirit to do Jehovah's will is shared by Bethelites who have received new assignments in the field. Adjustments in the work at Bethel have put greater emphasis on the preaching work. More resources, including experienced Bible teachers, are being directed to the busy harvest. In this report from the South Africa branch, we hear from loyal ones who are supporting theocratic direction.
On September 23, 2015, it was announced at all branches that the governing body was requesting all Bethel families to reduce in size.
For me personally, when they made that announcement on Wednesday, September 23, that was exciting. It was, I knew it was momentous.
When the announcement was made, tears welled up in my eyes because I realized how close we are to the end. And I remember just closing my eyes and saying to Jehovah, whatever you want, we'll do.
When I received news of my reassignment, initially I was numb.
When I got news about my reassignment, I was so scared in the beginning.
Caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it.
We were quite shocked and sad, but we were encouraged by the brothers at Bethel and also in the congregation.
Shocked, sad, numb, so scared. These are all reactions from Bethelites from South Africa to the announcement in September 2015 when Bethel families around the globe were told that they had to restrict their numbers. They had to let Bethelites go. And the whole point of this segment now is to spin things in a positive light. You heard Gary Breaux at the beginning say, oh, well, the emphasis, this is all because the emphasis needs to be on the preaching work. We need to get people out there in the streets and next to the carts so that we can participate in the warning work. Well, I showed in the JW rebuttal for April 2018, which is the last one that I made, May 2018, I showed in that rebuttal how the figures just don't add up when it comes to the growth going down and down and down. So even though in 2015 they were saying, well, we need to throw everything into the preaching work, the growth is down at 1.4% as of last year, which was 2017. So doesn't seem to have had much of an effect. And also, Watchtower cannot say, and this is a point I make in my book, Watchtower cannot say that the purpose behind this was purely for the preaching work, when they were also letting special pioneers go. And special pioneers, their whole point is to focus purely on the preaching work, and they get a stipend from the organisation that allows them to do that. They too were let go in huge numbers. So it's a twisted narrative, and Watchtower basically putting a spin on this to make it all look positive. But essentially what it amounts to is Watchtower downsizing, because in my opinion, the contributions just aren't coming in to justify the amount of money that it's costing them to keep these Bethels running.
The direction from the governing body was we're being reassigned as regular pioneers. We signed the forms for pioneering that very Thursday.
For me, I've always appreciated the scripture at 1 Samuel 12:22, where it states there, for the sake of his great name, Jehovah will not abandon his people.
I don't want to forget my Bethel time because it was lovely, but I want to stretch forward ahead to pioneering and really enjoy it.
We prayed specifically for a place that is going to help us to be as simple as possible so that we can focus our attention to the ministry.
All that I'd love to say to everyone who has been reassigned is that Jehovah is our Father, and He will never relinquish His responsibility as a Father. He will take care of us.
The governing body deeply appreciates the Brotherhood's loyal response to theocratic direction. Change is not always easy, but it helps when we look at Jehovah's blessing on new spiritual provisions and adjustments to the work.
Remarkable positivity there from the Bethelites, and there seems to be this feeling among those who are being interviewed here that, well, we're Bethelites and we've done all this work for Jehovah, so of course he's not going to abandon us. Of course he's going to take care of us. Well, with all due respect, what makes a Bethelite so special? And why would God take care of them and furnish them with all of their needs while ignoring the plight of child sex abuse victims and putting them in a position where they are having justice denied to them by having their abuse covered up? What's Jehovah doing for them? How can you worship a God that's interested in finding you jobs and places to live when you get kicked out of Bethel, but who isn't interested in protecting children from the worst of humanity?
Letters of appreciation from my brothers add to the governing body's confidence that Jehovah is directing his organization. A sister from the United States wrote this about JW Broadcasting. Often the programming seems like a direct answer to a prayer. After a particularly difficult day, she added, "What did I find today at home for me like a present from Jehovah? The March 2016 broadcast dealing with discouragement. Jehovah is certainly giving us what we need when we need it, and it comes to us in such variety."
Little bit of self-praise there in a JW Broadcasting episode for JW Broadcasting, reminding Jehovah's Witnesses that they're very lucky to get these episodes and how wonderful they are. I just find this whole reasoning about food at the proper time and Jehovah always provides what you need when you need it. Obviously, when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I swallowed this sort of thing hook, line and sinker. But now that I'm awake, I can view things a little bit more pragmatically. And the simple truth is that when you have 8 million followers, or however many million followers it was when I was a Jehovah's Witness, when you have such a large following, you could put out an article or a video on almost any subject, and inevitably it's going to be directly applicable to a percentage of your following. So for example, JW Broadcasting could put out a video on how to cope after being in a road traffic accident, for example. And inevitably, there's going to be a few hundred Jehovah's Witnesses, maybe even more, out of 8 million, who have literally just been in a road traffic accident, and they're like, this is Jehovah. This is Jehovah. He's supplying me with exactly what I need when I need it. But you don't think of it that way when you're a witness. You swallow this sort of thing, hook, line and sinker. But the simple truth is that that Watchtower could talk about anything and it would be applicable to somebody.
Getting along is not always easy. Angry words can bring you down, believe me. Then you find a reason to forgive, and now you realize it's true. Letting go's the thing to do. Before the sun slips from the sky, let's be sure we both see eye to eye. We'll forget the things we said, and please let's forgive. Brothers today, brothers will stay.
We'll always have reasons in this imperfect world to forgive. Look for the opportunities in your life to imitate Jehovah and forgive others.
And with that atrocious music video, we come to the end of my highlights or lowlights of the October 2016 JW Broadcasting episode. And you will have noticed that the theme of the music video tied in with Gary Breaux's comments on forgiveness. The whole music video, which I've spared you having to watch, because that really is dreadful music. It depicts various scenarios where Jehovah's Witnesses have to forgive each other. And I want to stress again, this is not a video about child abuse. Child abuse isn't mentioned anywhere in this particular JW Broadcasting episode. It's only when you bring in those awful comments that Gary Breaux made, where he said, we will never get rid of the two-witness rule. And he couldn't even bring himself to mention child abuse in those comments either. But it's only when you bring those comments in that you realise how nonsensical Watchtower's position is when it comes to child abuse. There is basically no justification for applying the Mosaic law to crimes. And if Watchtower really takes child abuse seriously as a crime, it will be reporting instances to the police immediately. They will not be first thinking, well, who needs to know about this? What's the procedure here? No, the police should be told straight away. Instead, you get Gary Breaux defending the two-witness rule, using Matthew 18 as justification, bringing in a New Testament verse, in other words, to say, well, it's not just the Mosaic law, it's the New Testament. But when you examine Matthew 18 using his own summary of that verse, it becomes immediately apparent that it cannot be applied to child sex abuse according to Watchtower's own published stance. So I hope you understand why I was just gobsmacked when I watched this, and in a way I'm grateful that it's taken me this long to do the rebuttal, because whoa, next time a witness brings up the two-witness rule, you get to explain to them that their own materials debunk the use of Matthew 18 in propping up that abominable rule. So that's pretty much all I have to give you for the October 2016 JW Broadcasting episode. I will be returning to doing the latest JW Broadcasting episode soon. That will be the one for June, but I have to wait for it to be released first. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and as always, thank you for watching.